My father's lawyer pointed at me, claiming I had manipulated a senile woman for her assets. When the courtroom doors burst open, an elderly woman in a tailored suit marched in, flanked by bodyguards. She met my gaze and said, "Stand up. It is time to tell the truth." My father told me my whole life she was dead, but today, that dead woman was standing right there, and she was a billionaire. My name is Daisy Garcia, and as I stepped through the heavy oak double doors of courtroom 304, I felt like I was walking into my own execution. The air inside the Rainier County Courthouse in Kingsport, Oregon, was thick and stagnant, smelling of lemon floor wax, old paper, and the distinct, metallic tang of anxiety. It was a smell I knew well. I had spent the last 7 years of my life inside rooms just like this one, sitting behind the prosecution table, watching predators get put away. But today, the geometry of the room had shifted. Today, I was not the hunter. I was the prey. I kept my chin high, my spine rigid against the back of the mahogany chair at the defendant's table. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer, a nervous tic I had developed during my rookie year. To my left, the gallery was already buzzing. A few local reporters were there, hungry for a scandal. I could feel the heat of their camera flashes against the side of my face, blinding white bursts that left after-images dancing in my vision. They were not here for justice. They were here because a family tearing itself apart over money is always good copy, especially when one of the players is a public servant. Then I heard it, the sound that used to make me wet the bed when I was 9 years old. Click, click, click. It was the sharp, aggressive staccato of expensive heels striking the marble floor. I did not have to turn my head to know who it was. Sabine Lane walked like she owned the very ground that deigned to support her feet. My stepmother, the woman who had systematically dismantled my childhood with the precision of a surgeon removing a vital organ. Walking beside her, shuffling his feet in a way that made him look smaller than his 6 feet of height, was my father, David Lane. I forced myself to look at them. I had to. If I looked away, I was 9 years old again, hiding in the laundry closet. Sabine was wearing a mournful shade of navy blue, a color chosen carefully to suggest humility and sorrow, neither of which she possessed. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked the part of the grieving, concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. My father wore a suit that was slightly too large for him, his shoulders hunched. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at the judge's bench, at his own hands, anywhere but at the daughter he was helping to destroy. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Elijah Mercer swept into the room. My stomach tightened. I knew Mercer. Kingsport was not a small city, but the legal community was a tight circle. I had testified in front of Mercer 3 times in the last 2 years. He was tough, fair, and had zero tolerance for nonsense. Usually, seeing him on the bench would be a relief. Today, it felt like a complication. We all sat. The wood of the bench creaked under the collective weight of the lies about to be told. "We are here in the matter of the guardianship of Evelyn Lane," Judge Mercer said, his voice gravelly and bored. He shuffled the papers in front of him. "And the petition for emergency freezing of assets." Graham Cole, my father's lawyer, stood up. Cole was a shark in a 3-piece suit. He cost $500 an hour, and he was worth every penny if you wanted to ruin someone's life legally. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward the center of the room, his movements fluid and practiced. "Your Honor," Cole began, his voice smooth like oil. "We are here today because of a tragedy, not a death, but the tragedy of exploitation. My clients, David and Sabine Lane, have brought this motion with heavy hearts. They have watched, helpless, as a vulnerable, elderly woman, David's own mother, has been isolated, manipulated, and coerced by the respondent." He turned and pointed a manicured finger directly at me. "Daisy Garcia," he said, saying my name like it was a dirty word. "A woman who has used her professional knowledge to prey on a confused grandmother she had no relationship with for 20 years. I kept my face neutral. It is something they teach you at the academy. Never let them see you bleed. But under the table, my hands were clenched so tight my fingernails were digging into my palms. I am a senior financial investigator for the North Sound Special Crimes Bureau. My badge number is 4922. My entire career, my entire adult life, has been dedicated to one thing: stopping people from hurting the elderly. I track down scammers who drain pension funds. I arrest caregivers who forge checks. I have sat in living rooms with weeping octogenarians who lost their homes because they trusted the wrong person. I am the shield. That is who I am. And now, Graham Cole was twisting that identity into a weapon to use against me. Ms. Garcia is an expert in elder financial abuse, Cole continued, pacing in front of the judge. She knows exactly how the system works. She knows how to hide assets. She knows how to manipulate the mental capacity evaluations. She has used the very skills the state of Oregon gave her to engineer a heist of the Lane family estate. He paused for dramatic effect. The reporters scribbled furiously. "We have statements," Cole said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Statements from neighbors who say Evelyn Lane was confused, that she thought Ms. Garcia was a nurse or a ghost. Ms. Garcia swooped in 3 months ago, cut off contact with the woman's loving son and daughter-in-law, and suddenly, there is a new will? A will that leaves everything to the estranged granddaughter and cuts out the only family who actually cared for her?" I looked at my father. David was staring at his hands, twisting his wedding ring. "Look at me." I willed him. "Look at your daughter and tell them it is a lie." But he didn't. He just sat there, the obedient soldier in Sabine's army. It was hard to breathe. The air in the courtroom felt thin. I wasn't listening to Cole anymore. I was remembering the kitchen in our old house on Elm Street. I was 10 years old. Flashback. I had washed the dishes. I had scrubbed the floor. I had folded the laundry. I had done everything perfectly because I wanted Sabine to smile at me. I wanted to be part of the family. I stood there, waiting for approval. Sabine had walked in, inspected a glass, and then dropped it on the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Look what you did," she had said, her voice calm, terrifyingly reasonable. "You are so clumsy, Daisy, so destructive. No wonder your mother left before she died. Who could love a child who breaks everything she touches?" She never hit me, not once. She didn't have to. Bruises heal. Broken bones knit back together. But words? Words like that settle into your marrow and rot you from the inside out. She convinced me I was a burden. She convinced the neighbors I was a trouble child. She convinced my father I was damaged goods. "Daisy?" The voice snapped me back to the present. Judge Mercer was looking at me over the rim of his reading glasses. "I asked if your counsel has a response, Ms. Garcia," the judge said. My lawyer, Naomi Vega, stood up. Naomi was young, hungry, and believed me. She was working pro bono because she knew my reputation at the Bureau. "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice steady, "this is a work of fiction. Daisy Garcia is a decorated officer of the court. The idea that she would risk her career, her reputation, and her freedom to exploit her own grandmother is absurd. Ms. Lane, Evelyn Lane, contacted Daisy. We have the phone records. Evelyn Lane asked for help because she was being financially drained by the petitioners." Naomi gestured to David and Sabine. Sabine let out a small, dramatic gasp, pressing a handkerchief to dry eyes. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Judge Mercer frowned. He looked from me to the papers, then back to me. "Investigator Garcia," Mercer said. He didn't call me Ms. Garcia. He used my title. "I have seen your work on the Sanderson case and the Miller fraud ring." Cole stiffened. He hadn't expected the judge to know me personally. "Then you know, Your Honor," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice did not shake. "That I despise elder abuse more than anything in this world. I would sooner cut off my own hand than steal a dime from my grandmother." Judge Mercer nodded slowly. "I am aware of your record, which makes these accusations all the more disturbing." Cole jumped back in. Sensing he was losing the narrative, Your Honor, with all due respect, even the best officers break. We believe Ms. Garcia is suffering from a psychological breakdown, perhaps projected trauma from her work. We have evidence of her unstable childhood, issues with authority, deep-seated resentment toward her father. My blood went cold. They were going to use my childhood, the childhood they destroyed. We are formally requesting, Cole announced, his voice booming, that the court issue an immediate suspension of Ms. Garcia's power of attorney over Evelyn Lane. Furthermore, we are submitting a complaint to the North Sound Special Crimes Bureau recommending Ms. Garcia be placed on administrative leave pending a psychiatric evaluation. We cannot have a mentally unstable woman carrying a badge and managing an estate worth potentially millions. The room went silent. This was the kill shot. They weren't just trying to get the money. They were trying to strip me of the only thing I had built for myself. My career, my integrity. I looked at Sabine. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking right at me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. She smiled. It was a tiny, cold curling of her red lips, the same smile she gave me when she told me I wasn't allowed to go to my senior prom because I hadn't earned it. The smile that said, I win, you lose, know your place. Daisy. My father finally looked up. He caught my eye, and I saw fear. He knew what they were doing was wrong. He knew Evelyn wasn't senile. He knew he had been mooching off his mother for decades, but he was more afraid of Sabine than he was of God or the law. He looked away quickly, shrinking back into his chair. Naomi was objecting, citing relevance and hearsay, but the damage was done. The reporters were typing furiously on their phones. Local hero or fraud? Investigator accused of robbing own grandmother. I could see the headlines already. I will take the motion under advisement, Judge Mercer said, rubbing his temples. But these are serious allegations. Mr. Cole, if you are dragging a decorated investigator's name through the mud, you better have more than childhood anecdotes. Oh, we have more, Cole said, tapping a thick manila folder on his desk. We have the medical records of Evelyn Lane, proving she lacks capacity. We have the testimony of her caregivers. We are ready to proceed. I looked down at the table. My hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from rage. Pure, white-hot rage. I thought about the file in my own briefcase, the investigative work I had done over the last 2 weeks, the bank transfers I had traced, the emails I had recovered. I had found the truth. I knew exactly how much money David and Sabine had siphoned off Evelyn over the last 10 years. 50,000 here, 12,000 there. Loans that were never repaid. Gifts that were coerced. I had come here today thinking that the truth would be enough. I thought that because I was the good guy, because I was the law, I would win. But I had forgotten the most important lesson of my childhood. Inside the Lane family, the truth doesn't matter. Only power matters, and right now, sitting at the plaintiff's table with their high-priced lawyer and their fabricated narrative, David and Sabine held all the power. I felt a sudden, crushing weight of isolation. I was alone, just like I was when I was 9, just like I was when I was 16, packing my bags to leave a house that never felt like a home. There was no one coming to save me. Evelyn was not here. She was frail, or so everyone thought. She was a silent victim on a piece of paper. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and floor wax. I placed my hand on my file. I would fight them, even if I lost my badge, even if they dragged my name through the dirt until I couldn't get a job as a mall cop. I would not let them take her. I would not let them do to Evelyn what they did to me. Your Honor, Cole said, checking his watch. Before we proceed with witness testimony, we believe the estate is substantial, much larger than initially disclosed. We need to secure those assets immediately to prevent Miss Garcia from disappearing them. The assets are safe, I said, my voice cutting through the room. They are in a trust. A trust controlled by you, Cole sneered. A trust for a woman who the world believes is a retired schoolteacher living on a pension. But we know better, don't we? We know there is land. We know there are patents. I blinked. Patents? I knew Evelyn had money, more than my father realized, but I didn't know the extent of it. I had only scratched the surface of the financial records before the lawsuit hit. "The court is ready to hear the opening arguments," Judge Mercer said, banging his gavel once. "Ms. Vega, call your first witness." But before Naomi could speak, before the bailiff could move, a low rumble started from the back of the courtroom. It was the sound of heavy doors being pushed open with authority. The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop. Every head in the gallery turned. The reporters stopped typing. Even the dust motes dancing in the light from the high windows seemed to freeze. I turned around in my chair. My father's lawyer froze mid-gesture. Sabine's smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of genuine confusion. My father went pale, all the blood draining from his face as if he had seen a ghost. And in a way, he had, because the narrative Graham Cole had just spent 20 minutes building, the story of a helpless, senile, bedridden old woman who needed the protection of her loving son, was about to collide violently with reality. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs. As the doors swung wide, I didn't know it yet, but the girl who had been beaten down by words for 20 years was about to die in this courtroom, and someone else was about to take her place. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, and waited for the hurricane to enter. The air in the courtroom was stifling, but the cold that gripped my chest had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a phantom cold, a memory of a drafty hallway in a house on the other side of town. As I looked at my father's averted eyes and Sabine's rigid posture, the mahogany tables and the judge's bench dissolved. The years peeled back like layers of old paint, revealing the raw, unvarnished wood of my past. I was no longer a 34-year-old financial investigator. I was 9 years old, standing on the threshold of a life I had not chosen, holding a plastic garbage bag filled with everything I owned. My mother had died 3 weeks prior. It was a car accident, sudden and violent, the kind of event that cleaves time into before and after. I was still in the numb phase of grief, where the world feels like it is made of gray cotton. When my father came to pick me up from my aunt's house, he had remarried 2 years earlier, a woman named Sabine, whom I had met only twice. He told me I was coming to live with them now. He said it was going to be a fresh start. He lied. The house on Elm Street was beautiful. It was a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew I was an intruder. The air smelled of lavender and bleach, a sterile scent that burned my nose. There were no photos of me. There were no toys. There was only the pristine, magazine-ready perfection of Sabine's kingdom. Sabine was standing in the foyer. She did not hug me. She did not offer a condolence. She looked at my sneakers, which were slightly muddy from the walk to the car, and then she looked at my face. "Take those off," she said. Her voice was soft, melodic even. It was a voice made for reading bedtime stories, but she used it like a garrote. "We do not drag filth into this house. Daisy, you have caused enough mess already." That was the first strike, the first of thousands. I learned quickly that Sabine did not believe in physical punishment. She was too smart for that. Bruises could be photographed. Broken bones could be set. Sabine dealt in psychological warfare. She understood that if you break a person's spirit, the body will follow. Every morning began with a reminder of my burden. At breakfast, she would slide a plate of dry toast toward me and sigh, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. "David is working double shifts this week," she would say to the heir, not looking at me. "The cost of adding a dependent is so high. We were going to go to Italy this summer, but sacrifices must be made, even if they are unfair." She never yelled. If she had yelled, I could have hated her openly. Instead, she whispered. She positioned herself as the martyr and me as the cross she had to bear. She called me a displacement. She told me that families are delicate ecosystems, and that I was an invasive species. "You do not fit here," she told me once while I was doing my homework at the kitchen table. She was arranging flowers in a vase, cutting the stems with a sharp click of her shears. "It is not your fault," Really, you are just extra, like a spare part that nobody ordered. My father was the ghost in his own house. David Lane was a man who valued comfort above all else. He wanted his dinner hot, his beer cold, and his house quiet. If Sabine was happy, his life was easy. If Sabine was unhappy, his life was hard. Therefore, I was the variable that needed to be controlled. I remember one Saturday when I was 11, I had spent the entire morning scrubbing the baseboards of the living room with a toothbrush, because Sabine said they looked dingy. My knees were bruised from the hardwood, and my hands smelled of lemon cleaner. I had finished the living room, the dining room, and was starting on the hallway. Our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, knocked on the back door to drop off some mail that had been delivered to her house by mistake. I answered the door, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "Oh, hello, Daisy," Mrs. Gable said, smiling. "Working hard on a Saturday?" Before I could answer, Sabine appeared behind me. She rested a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was tight, her fingernails digging into my collarbone just enough to hurt, but to Mrs. Gable, it looked like a loving embrace. "Oh, you know how it is, Susan," Sabine said, her voice dripping with sweet exhaustion. "We are trying to teach Daisy the value of contribution. It is such a struggle to get her to lift a finger. She would sleep until noon if I let her. I have to beg her just to help keep her own space clean. It is exhausting, really, raising a child with no natural sense of gratitude." I stood there, frozen. I had been up since 6 in the morning. I had cleaned the bathrooms. I had folded 3 loads of laundry. My back ached. "Well, keep at it, Sabine," Mrs. Gable said sympathetically. "You are a saint for taking her in. Step-parenting is so difficult." When the door closed, Sabine shoved me forward. Not hard, just a stumble. "Back to work," she said. "And fix your face. You look sullen. No one likes a sullen child." I looked at my father. He was sitting in his recliner, reading the sports section. He had heard everything. He had heard her lie about me. He knew I had been working like a servant all day. "Dad?" I whispered. He lowered the paper an inch. He didn't look at me. He looked at the television. "Don't start, Daisy," he said, his voice flat. "Sabine is under a lot of pressure. Just do what she asks. Don't make a big deal out of nothing." That was his mantra. Don't make a big deal out of nothing. As if my reality was nothing. As if my pain was an inconvenience to his relaxation. I realized then that I could not rely on him. I could not rely on anyone. I had to build my own armor. I decided that I would be perfect. I would be so good, so smart, so undeniable, that even Sabine would have to acknowledge me. I threw myself into my schoolwork with a desperate, manic intensity. I stayed late at the library because it was the only place where silence was peaceful. Not heavy. I devoured books on history, mathematics, and logic. I loved math because numbers did not lie. 2 plus 2 was always 4. It did not change because someone was in a bad mood. It did not change because someone wanted to hurt you. When I was 12, in the 7th grade, I entered the district mathematics competition. I had studied for months, practicing calculus problems that were 3 years above my grade level. I won. I took first place out of 50 students. I was given a gold medal on a blue ribbon and a certificate that said, "First place, academic excellence." I walked home that day with the medal hidden under my shirt, afraid to show it, yet desperate to show it. I wanted to see my father's eyes light up. I wanted, just for 1 second, to be his daughter, not his mistake. Dinner that night was meatloaf. The silence was thick. I waited until my father had taken a few bites and seemed relaxed. "I won something today," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I pulled the medal out and placed it on the table next to the salt shaker. The gold medal caught the light of the chandelier. "I took first place in the district math competition." My father looked at it. A small smile touched his lips. "Well, look at that," he said. "Good job, Daisy." For a heartbeat, I felt warm. I felt real. Then Sabine laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a glass breaking. She picked up the medal, examining it with a look of amusement, as if it were a cheap toy from a cereal box. "Oh, David," she said, looking at my father, "don't encourage this. You know how these public schools are. They have quotas. They have to give awards to the children from broken homes. It makes the district look compassionate." She dropped the medal back onto the table. It clattered loudly. "What?" I whispered. "No, I scored the highest. I got 100% on the final round." Sabine smiled at me, a pitying, condescending smile. "Daisy, honey, be realistic. Do you really think you are smarter than the doctor's children? The lawyer's children? The teachers probably just felt sorry for you. The poor girl with the dead mother and the stepmother who tries so hard. It is a pity prize. Enjoy it, but do not fool yourself." I looked at my father. I begged him with my eyes to correct her. Tell her I studied. I thought, tell her you saw me with the flashcards. Tell her I'm smart. David chewed his meatloaf. He took a sip of water. "Sabine might have a point, Daisy," he said, not meeting my gaze. "You don't want to get a big head. Humility is important." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a tether being cut. I picked up my medal. I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood up, took my plate to the sink, scraped the rest of my dinner into the garbage, and washed my plate. "I will be in my room," I said. "Don't slam the door," Sabine called after me. I didn't go to my room. I went out the back door to the porch. It was raining, a cold, gray Oregon drizzle. I sat on the damp steps, shivering in my thin sweater. I pulled a small, black composition notebook out of my backpack. I had started keeping it a month ago. It was my secret weapon. If they were going to gaslight me, though I didn't know that word yet, I was going to create a record. I needed proof that I existed. I needed proof that my memories were real. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. My handwriting was small and cramped. October 14th, 7:30 in the evening. I won the math competition. I got every question right. Mr. Henderson checked it twice. It was not charity. I am smart. Sabine said it was a pity prize. Dad agreed with her. They are lying. Fact. I studied for 4 weeks. Fact. I solved the quadratic equation in 30 seconds. Fact. Sabine is jealous. Writing it down made it true. The ink on the paper was permanent. They could twist the air with their words, but they couldn't change what was written in this book. This notebook was my witness. It was the only thing in the world that was on my side. I looked out at the rain falling on the manicured lawn. I felt a hardness settling in my chest, replacing the hurt. It was cold and heavy, like a stone, but it made me feel strong. "I will not forget," I whispered to the rain. "I will write it all down. Every mean word, every lie, every time you make me feel small." I looked back through the screen door. I could see them in the warm, yellow light of the kitchen. Sabine was laughing at something, pouring more wine into my father's glass. They looked like a perfect, happy couple. They looked like good people. But I had my notebook. I had my data. I swore then, sitting on the cold concrete, that I would never let anyone define my reality again. I would collect the facts. I would hoard the truth like gold. I would become so undeniable, so formidable, that one day, I wouldn't just be the girl taking notes in the dark. I would be the one holding the gavel. I closed the book, the cardboard cover rough against my fingers. I wiped a raindrop off my cheek, or maybe it was a tear, but I wouldn't admit that, not even in the log. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked back into the house. I was done seeking their love. I was starting my investigation. By the time I was 16, I had realized something that would define the rest of my life. People lie. They lie to save face. They lie to manipulate. And they lie to hurt. But numbers? Numbers never lie. If you look closely enough at a bank statement, a credit card bill, or a grocery receipt, you can see the skeleton of the truth beneath the skin of deception. I discovered I had a knack for it during my junior year of high school. I was taking an advanced accounting elective, mostly because the classroom was in the basement where the air conditioning was strong and the silence was absolute. I finished the semester project, balancing a mock corporate budget, in 3 days. The teacher, Mr. Henderson, told me I had the mind of a forensic accountant. He said I saw patterns where other people just saw noise. That was the spark. I went home that afternoon and looked at my life through the lens of a balance sheet. On the liability side, I had Sabine, a woman who viewed my existence as a tax on her happiness, and David, a father who was insolvent in the currency of courage. On the asset side, I had nothing, zero. If I wanted to survive, I needed to build equity. I needed a war chest. My plan was simple, brutal, and secret. I needed to leave that house the second I turned 18, and I needed to do it without asking them for a single penny. If I asked for money, I gave them power. If I took their money, I was beholden to them. I wanted to be free. I started working under the table. I tutored algebra to failing freshmen during lunch hour for $10 a session. I walked Mrs. Gable's golden retriever 3 times a week. I picked up shifts at a diner 2 towns over on weekends, telling Sabine I was at the library studying for SATs. She believed me because she wanted to believe I was out of her hair. I became a hoarder of currency. I did not buy clothes. I did not go to movies. I did not buy the Starbucks lattes that my classmates carried around like status symbols. Every dollar bill, every quarter, every dime went into a hollowed-out biology textbook on the bottom shelf of my closet. One night, sitting on the floor with my door locked, I counted it, $2,450. It was not a fortune, but it smelled like freedom. It smelled like a deposit on a cheap apartment and a bus ticket to anywhere but here. But the real escape velocity would come from education. I knew Sabine would never pay for college. She had been dropping hints since I was 14. "College is so expensive these days," she would say, flipping through a catalog. "And really, Daisy, you are so domestic. You are good at cleaning. Maybe you should just look for a nice husband and settle down. We could use the help around the house until you find someone." The suggestion made my blood turn to ice. She wanted to turn me into a permanent servant. She wanted to keep me in that house, scrubbing her floors and witnessing her fake martyrdom, until I withered away. I applied to every scholarship I could find. I wrote essays until my fingers cramped. I applied to the Pell Grant. I applied for state aid. I targeted Cascade State University. It was 3 hours away, close enough to drive in an emergency, far enough that they couldn't just drop by. They had one of the best criminal justice and finance programs on the West Coast. The acceptance letter came in March. It was a thick envelope. I intercepted the mailman before he reached the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tore it open behind the garage. Accepted. Full academic scholarship covering tuition and board. I leaned against the rough siding of the garage and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. I had done it. I waited until dinner to tell them. I placed the letter on the table next to the roast chicken. "I got into Cascade State," I said, "and I got a scholarship. I am leaving in August." The silence that followed was heavy. My father looked up, a piece of potato halfway to his mouth. He looked surprised, maybe even a little impressed, but he quickly glanced at Sabine to check the weather forecast before he reacted. Sabine stopped chewing. She put her fork down slowly. "Cascade State?" she asked, her voice tight. "That is a party school, Daisy, and who is going to pay for the books, the fees, the transportation? We certainly cannot afford it. David's bonus was smaller this year." "I have savings," I said calmly, "and I will work part-time. I have calculated the costs. I can cover it." Sabine's eyes narrowed. She realized she was losing control. The variable was removing itself from the equation. "And who is going to help me with the house?" she asked, her voice rising just an octave, entering that pitch that usually made my father cave. "I have my migraines. David, you know I cannot do the stairs every day. Daisy was supposed to stay here for a few years, to pay us back for raising her." Pay them back, as if I were a loan they had taken out and now regretted. I looked at my father. This was his chance. This was the moment he could say, "She is my daughter. She has a future. Let her go." David cleared his throat. He took a sip of water. Maybe you could defer for a year, Daisy, he suggested weakly. Just until Sabine feels better. It is a big transition for everyone. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. He was a hollow man, a shell suit stuffed with fear. No, I said. It was the firmest no I had ever spoken in that house. I accepted the offer this afternoon. I am going. The next 4 months were a cold war. Sabine stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through sticky notes left on the fridge. Clean the gutter, wash the curtains, defrost the freezer. I did it all. I did it with a smile, because every chore was a countdown. The day I left, the sky was a brilliant, aching blue. I had packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I had bought a rusted 20-year-old sedan from a neighbor for $800. It smelled like wet dog and stale cigarettes, but it had an engine that ran. I carried my last bag to the curb. My father was at work. He hadn't taken the day off to see me off. He had said a quick, awkward goodbye over breakfast, handing me a $20 bill like he was tipping a waitress, whispering good luck, before rushing out the door. Sabine was standing on the porch. She was wearing a silk robe, clutching her coffee mug like a weapon. I opened the car door and threw my bag in. Then I turned to look at her one last time. I wanted to remember this. I wanted to remember the face of the woman who had tried to erase me. "You will be back," she called out. Her voice carried across the lawn, sharp and clear. "You do not know how the real world works, Daisy. You are awkward. You are cold. No one is going to put up with you out there. You will be back here begging for a room within 6 months." I didn't answer. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I got into the driver's seat, cranked the engine, it took 2 tries to turn over, and put the car in drive. As I pulled away, I watched her in the rearview mirror. She got smaller and smaller until she was just a speck of navy blue against the white house. Then I turned the corner, and she was gone. I drove for 3 hours without turning on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I was terrified. I had $300 left in my pocket and no safety net, but I was driving my own car, on my own gas, toward my own life. University was not the movie experience everyone talks about. I did not go to frat parties. I did not join a sorority. I did not date. I lived in a single room in the cheapest dorm, a concrete box that smelled of industrial cleaner. I treated college like a job. I woke up at 5 in the morning to study before my classes. I sat in the front row of every lecture, recording everything the professor said. I spent my afternoons in the library, buried in books on tax law, embezzlement schemes, and asset forfeiture. At night, I worked. I got a job as a night auditor at a motel off the highway. It was perfect. I sat behind bulletproof glass from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, checking guests in and reconciling the day's receipts. It was quiet. It gave me time to study, and it taught me how to spot a lie. I saw people checking in with fake IDs, using stolen credit cards, cheating on their spouses. I learned to read the nervous twitch of an eye, the hesitation before answering a simple question. I was lonely. Yes, sometimes, watching groups of girls laughing in the cafeteria. I felt a pang of longing. I wondered what it was like to be that light, that unburdened. But then I would remember Sabine's voice saying, "No one is going to put up with you," and I would turn back to my textbook. I would not give anyone ammunition. I kept my room spotless. I paid my tuition fees the day they were due. I was a ghost, efficient, invisible, and flawless. By my junior year, I was the top student in the forensic accounting program. My professors knew me as the intense girl who could find a discrepancy of 5 cents in a 50-page ledger. One afternoon, during a seminar on elder financial abuse, my professor, Dr. Aris, projected a case study on the board. It was a woman who had signed over her house to a caretaker who had slowly isolated her from her community. "This is the most common crime in America that nobody talks about," Dr. Aris said. "It is not a crime of violence. It is a crime of intimacy. The perpetrator is almost always someone the victim loves, a child, a neighbor, a new friend. They use affection as a weapon. They weaponize trust. I stared at the screen. My throat went tight. I saw Sabine. I saw the way she had isolated my father, the way she had isolated me. I saw the slow, methodical way she had taken control of every aspect of our lives. That was the moment I knew what I was going to do. I wasn't just going to be an accountant. I was going to be a hunter. I graduated summa cum laude. My father and Sabine were not there. I hadn't invited them. I walked across the stage, took my diploma, and didn't look for anyone in the crowd. I was my own family. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in an interview room at the North Sound Special Crimes Bureau. The Bureau was an elite state agency tasked with handling complex financial crimes that local police didn't have the resources to touch. The hiring director, a gruff woman named Commander Holloway, looked at my resume. "You have perfect grades," she said, tapping the paper. "You have incredible references from your professors, but this job isn't about math, Garcia. It is about people, bad people. Why do you want to work in the elder abuse unit? It is depressing. It is hard. Most people burn out in 2 years." I sat up straight. I looked her in the eye. "Because they are the perfect victims," I said. "Society ignores them. Their families ignore them. They are told they are confused, that they are burdens. I know what it feels like to be told you don't matter. I know what it feels like to have your reality twisted by someone who has power over you." Holloway held my gaze for a long time. Then she nodded. "Welcome to the Bureau." I started the next Monday. I threw myself into the work. I became the person who stayed late, the investigator who dug through 10 years of bank statements to find the pattern. I saved a retired teacher from losing her pension to a romance scammer. I put a nephew in jail for forging his uncle's signature on a power of attorney document. Every time I closed a case, every time I saw the look of relief on an old person's face when I told them their money was safe, I felt a little bit of the weight lift from my own chest. I was fixing the world, one case at a time. I was proving Sabine wrong. I was useful. I was powerful. I thought I had escaped. I thought the darkness of Elm Street was behind me, a closed chapter in a book I never intended to read again. I was building a life of justice, surrounded by other officers who believed in the law. I had no idea that while I was out there saving strangers, the very crime I had dedicated my life to fighting was festering in my own bloodline. I had no idea that the biggest case of my career wasn't going to be a stranger. It was going to be the woman I had been told was dead for 25 years. I was the expert on predators, but I never saw the one coming for my own name until it was almost too late. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the coffee in my mug had gone cold 3 hours ago. The offices of the North Sound Special Crimes Bureau were silent, save for the hum of the server banks in the back room and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard. I was burying myself in work, which was my standard operating procedure. When the rest of the world slept, I hunted. I was deep into a federal asset recovery case, a sprawling mess involving offshore accounts in the Caymans and a shell company that had been laundering money for a defunct pharmaceutical startup. It was the kind of forensic accounting puzzle I lived for. I was tracing a series of wire transfers that had been routed through a bank in Zurich, trying to find the ultimate beneficiary. The money trail was designed to be a maze, a series of dead ends and false leads meant to exhaust any investigator foolish enough to try and follow it. But I was not just any investigator, I was patient. I pulled up a list of blind trusts that had received dividends from the shell company in the fiscal year of 2022. It was a long list, mostly anonymous entities with names like Blue Ocean Holdings or Apex Capital. My eyes scanned the rows of data, looking for patterns, looking for the mistake. There is always a mistake. Then, my finger froze on the trackpad. Row 412. Entity name: E.L. Horizons Trust. Grantor: Evelyn Lane. Beneficiary status: active. I blinked. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and rubbed my eyes. Assuming exhaustion was playing tricks on me, Lane was a common name. There were thousands of Lanes in Oregon alone. It meant nothing. But the name Evelyn was not common. Not anymore. And the combination of Evelyn and Lane sent a strange, electric jolt through my nervous system. My father had told me my grandmother, Evelyn Lane, had died when I was 2 years old. He said it was a stroke. He said it was quick. He said there was no funeral because she had requested cremation and no service. Growing up, there were no pictures of her in the house on Elm Street. When I asked about her, David would just shake his head and say she was a difficult woman and it was better not to dwell on the past. I looked at the screen again. Evelyn Lane. I opened a new tab. I shouldn't have done it. Strictly speaking, using bureau resources for personal queries was a violation of protocol. But this was already part of the case file. I was just thorough. I ran the name through the LexisNexis database, cross-referencing it with the tax ID number attached to the trust. The system thought for a moment, the loading circle spinning, before spitting out a profile that made my breath catch in my throat. Subject: Evelyn Marie Lane. Date of birth: March 12, 1945. Status: living. Primary residence: Kingsport, Oregon. Alive. The word hung in the air like smoke. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. A slow, heavy thud. March 12th, 1945. That was her birthday. I knew it because I had found my own birth certificate once when I was digging for papers to apply for college, and her name and birth year were listed on the parental lineage section. I stared at the screen. If this was her, she was 80 years old. She wasn't dead. She was alive, and she was living in Kingsport. My hands were shaking as I typed in the query for the EL Horizons Trust. If she was just a regular pensioner, why did she have a trust fund attached to a federal money laundering investigation? Was she a victim? Was she being used as a mule? The financial summary loaded, and I audibly gasped in the empty office. The EL Horizons Trust was not a retirement fund. It was a holding company, and the assets under management were not in the thousands. They were not even in the millions. The total valuation was $4.2 billion. I stood up. I actually stood up and walked away from my desk, pacing a tight circle in the middle of the bullpen. This had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system. My father was a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. He drove a 10-year-old Ford. We clipped coupons. Sabine complained if the electric bill went over $150. There was no way my grandmother was a billionaire. I went back to the computer. I needed to verify the source of wealth. I dug into the corporate filings of the trust. It turned out Evelyn Lane was one of the silent co-founders of TerraLink Systems, a semiconductor manufacturer that had exploded in the late 1990s. According to the Articles of Incorporation, she had provided the initial seed capital and held a 40% equity stake, which she had retained even after the company went public. She had never given interviews. She had never appeared on magazine covers. She was a ghost investor. I looked at her address history. Current address: the Penthouse, the Obsidian Tower, downtown Kingsport. Previous address: 1980 to 2010, 422 Maple Street, Kingsport, Oregon. I stopped breathing. Maple Street. I grew up on Elm Street. Maple Street was 3 blocks away. 3 blocks. I could walk there in 5 minutes. I had ridden my bike past that house 1,000 times. It was a nice house, a large Victorian with a wraparound porch, but nothing that screamed billionaire. It was just a house. For 18 years, I had lived 5 minutes away from my grandmother, and my father had told me she was dead. A sudden, violent memory assaulted me. I was 11 years old. I was bringing the mail inside. It was a Saturday. I was handing the stack to Sabine. There were the usual bills, the catalogs, and a thick cream-colored envelope. The paper felt heavy, expensive. It was handwritten in beautiful, looping calligraphy. To Daisy Garcia. I had reached for it. "This is for me," I had said. Sabine had snatched it out of my hand. Her movements were like a striking cobra. "It is junk mail." "Daisy," she had said, her voice sharp. "Solicitations, credit card scams. They target children now. It is disgusting." "But it has my name on it," I had argued, "and it looks like a card." "It is a scam," Sabine had insisted, walking to the kitchen trash can. She tore the envelope in half without opening it. Then she tore it again. The sound of the thick paper ripping was loud in the quiet kitchen. She dropped the pieces into the garbage, right on top of the wet coffee grounds. "I am protecting you. Do not be so ungrateful." I remembered the feeling of loss I had felt then, a strange, intuitive sense that something important had just been thrown away. I sat back down in my chair, the memory making my skin crawl. It hadn't been one letter, it had been dozens. Over the years, I remembered thick envelopes, packages around my birthday that Sabine claimed were misdelivered and sent back. They knew. David and Sabine knew she was alive. They knew she was rich, and they had built a wall of lies so high and so thick that I hadn't even known to look over it. Why? The answer was sickeningly obvious: control. If I had known I had a grandmother who loved me, a grandmother who was a billionaire, Sabine would have lost her leverage. I would have had an escape route. I would not have been the free labor, the punching bag, the scapegoat. I would have been powerful. And the money, if they kept me away from her, maybe they thought they could position themselves as the only heirs. My investigation into the money laundering case was forgotten. I was now investigating my own life. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I printed the trust deeds. I printed the address history. I printed the corporate structure of TerraLink. I built a file, just like I would for any suspect. Then, I looked at the date of the most recent document, a medical power of attorney draft that had been uploaded to the county clerk's server just 3 days ago. It was a petition to declare Evelyn Lane incapacitated. The petitioners were David Lane and Sabine Lane. They were making their move. They weren't just waiting for her to die anymore. They were trying to take control of her assets while she was still breathing. I looked at the clock. It was 4 a.m. I couldn't stay on this case. If I was going to stop them, I had to step out of the shadows of the federal investigation and step into the light as her granddaughter. But I was a federal agent. I had ethical codes. I had conflicts of interest to declare. I waited until 6 a.m. I didn't sleep. I just watched the sun come up over the city skyline, turning the gray clouds to a bruised purple. At 6:15, Commander Holloway walked in. She was carrying a travel mug and looked like she had already run 5 miles. She saw me sitting at my desk, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by stacks of paper. "Garcia," she said, pausing at my cubicle. "You look like hell. Did you solve the Cayman case?" "I found something else," I said. My voice sounded raspy. "I need to speak with you, in private. It is urgent." Holloway looked at my face, saw the intensity in my eyes, and nodded. "My office, 5 minutes." I walked into her office and laid the file on her desk. I didn't sit down. "I have identified a conflict of interest in the Shell Company investigation," I said formally. "One of the connected entities is the E.L. Horizons Trust. The grantor is Evelyn Lane." Holloway took a sip of coffee. "Okay, and who is Evelyn Lane to you?" "She is my grandmother," I said. "The one my father told me died in 1992. Holloway froze. She lowered the mug slowly. "Excuse me?" "She is alive," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "She is living here in Kingsport. She is worth over $4 billion, and my father and stepmother are currently filing legal motions to declare her incompetent and take control of her estate." Holloway looked at the file, then back at me. She was a hard woman, but I saw a flicker of genuine shock in her eyes. "You had no idea?" she asked. "Zero," I said. "I thought I was an orphan on my mother's side, and that my father's parents were long dead. I found this by accident last night." Holloway leaned back in her chair. She interlaced her fingers. "You know what this means, Daisy. You cannot touch the federal case. You are compromised." "I know," I said. "I am formally recusing myself from the Cayman investigation, but I am asking for permission to pursue the guardianship matter, not as an agent of the Bureau, but as a private citizen. However, I want to use my accumulated leave to investigate the potential fraud my father is committing. If they are filing false medical reports to seize control of a $1 billion estate, that is a crime. That falls under our jurisdiction. Holloway thought about it. She tapped her pen on the desk. If you go near this, they will come for you, she warned. Your father, this stepmother you told me about, if there are billions at stake, they will play dirty. They will try to destroy your career to discredit you. They already tried to destroy my life, I said, my voice cold and steady. I survived that. I can survive this. Holloway nodded once. Take the leave. 2 weeks. Keep your badge. But do not flash it unless you have to. If you find evidence of criminal fraud, real, actionable evidence, you bring it to me, and we will open an official file. Until then, this is a personal family matter. Do not embarrass the Bureau. I won't, I promised. Daisy, Holloway said as I turned to leave, be careful. Family is the most dangerous kind of suspect. They know where you sleep. I walked out of the precinct and into the cool morning air. I didn't go home to sleep. I went to a diner and ordered black coffee. I sat there, staring at the file. I had the address, the Obsidian Tower. I had the phone number of her legal team, listed on the trust documents. I looked at my phone. My thumb hovered over the keypad. For 34 years, I had believed the narrative that I was unwanted, that I was a burden, that I had no one. It was a lie constructed to keep me weak. I thought about the little girl sitting on the porch in the rain, writing in her notebook. Fact. Sabine is jealous. She had been more than jealous. She had been terrified. She had been terrified that one day I would find out who I really was. I picked up my phone. I wasn't going to call my father. I wasn't going to call Sabine. I was going to call the woman who had been waiting for me for 3 decades. I dialed the number for the law firm representing the trust. Good morning, I said when the receptionist answered. My name is Daisy Garcia. I am an investigator with the North Sound Special Crimes Bureau, but I am calling regarding a personal matter. I believe I am the granddaughter of your client, Evelyn Lane, and I have reason to believe she is in immediate danger. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Please hold, Ms. Garcia, the receptionist said, her voice trembling slightly. Ms. Lane has left standing instructions for this call. Standing instructions. She had been waiting. I closed my eyes. The tears finally came, hot and fast, tracking down my cheeks in the middle of the busy diner. I wasn't crying because of the money. I was crying because for the first time in my life, I realized I hadn't been abandoned. I had been stolen. And now, I was coming home. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before hitting send. The email draft on my phone screen was short, clinical, and devoid of emotion. It had to be. If I was walking into a trap, I needed to keep my armor on. Subject: Inquiry regarding familial connection. Evelyn Lane. To whom it may concern. My name is Daisy Garcia. I am a private citizen and an investigator with the state of Oregon. Through recent public record searches, I have reason to believe that the Evelyn Lane represented by your firm is my paternal grandmother. I have been informed for 32 years that my grandmother is deceased. If this is in error, I am requesting a brief audience to clarify the matter. I seek nothing financial. I only seek the truth. Sincerely, Daisy Garcia. I pressed the blue arrow. It was done. I expected a week of silence. I expected a generic rejection from a paralegal. Instead, my phone rang 11 minutes later. The caller ID displayed a number from downtown Kingsport. Ms. Garcia? The voice was male, deep, and sounded expensive. This is Arthur Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore & Associates. Ms. Lane has received your correspondence. She would like to see you. Can you be at our offices in the Obsidian Tower in 1 hour? 1 hour, not next week, now. I will be there, I said. The Obsidian Tower was a fortress of glass and steel that pierced the skyline of Kingsport. It was the kind of building where the air conditioning smelled like money, and the security guards wore suits that cost more than my car. I took the elevator to the 45th floor, my reflection in the polished steel doors looking pale and terrified. I smoothed my blazer. I checked my badge, tucked into my belt, a reminder of who I was. I wasn't a scared little girl. I was a professional. When the elevator doors slid open, Arthur Whitmore was waiting. He was a silver-haired man with eyes that missed nothing. He shook my hand firmly. "She is in the conference room," he said. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for clarification. He led me down a corridor lined with abstract art that probably cost more than the house I grew up in. "I must warn you, Ms. Garcia, Evelyn is particular. She does not suffer fools, and she is very protective of her privacy." "I am not here to invade her privacy," I said, my voice steady. "I just want to know why my father lied." Whitmore stopped at a set of double glass doors. He looked at me, and for a second, his professional mask slipped. He looked almost sad. "She has been waiting a long time for someone to ask that question," he said. He opened the door. The conference room was vast, dominated by a table long enough to land a plane on. At the far end, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, sat a woman. She was small, but she took up all the space in the room. She wore a cream-colored suit that was impeccably tailored. Her hair was a striking snowy white, cut in a sharp bob. She was leaning on a cane made of dark, polished wood with a silver handle. I walked toward her. The click of my boots on the floor echoed in the silence. 10 feet away, I stopped. For the first time in my life, I looked into the face of the ghost. She didn't speak. She studied me. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and piercing. She looked at my shoes. She looked at my cheap blazer. She looked at my hands, which were clenched at my sides. Then she looked at my face. She stared at me for a full minute, an agonizing stretch of time where I felt like I was being dismantled and reassembled. "You have her chin," she said finally. Her voice was not the shaky rasp of an 80-year-old invalid. It was clear, resonant, and sharp as a tack. "Excuse me?" I said. "Your mother," she said. "Elena, you have her chin, and her eyes. You look more like her than you do David. Thank God for that." The air left my lungs. My mother was a taboo subject in the Lane household. To hear her name spoken with such casual familiarity and with such obvious affection disarmed me completely. "You knew my mother?" I asked. "I loved your mother," Evelyn said. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sit down, Daisy. We have 30 years of silence to catch up on." I sat. I placed my hands on the table to stop them from shaking. "My father told me you died," I said. I didn't want small talk. I wanted the facts. "He told me you died of a stroke in 1992. He said you were cremated. Why?" Evelyn let out a dry, bitter laugh. She reached for a glass of water, her hand trembling slightly, the only sign of her age. "David has always preferred the path of least resistance," she said. Killing me off was easier than explaining why his mother despised his new wife. She looked at me with an intensity that burned. "I did not abandon you, Daisy. You need to know that before we go any further. I did not leave you." "Then where were you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Where were you when Sabine was telling me I was garbage? Where were you when I was scrubbing floors at 10 years old? I lived 3 blocks away. 3 blocks." "I was right there," Evelyn said softly. "Fighting a war I was losing." She pressed a button on the intercom console in front of her. "Arthur, bring the box, please." A moment later, the lawyer entered carrying a large gray archival box. He placed it in front of me and left the room. "Open it," Evelyn commanded. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were stacks of envelopes, hundreds of them. The paper was yellowed with age. I picked up the top one. It was addressed to Daisy Garcia, care of David Lane, 422 Elm Street. The postmark was from 24 years ago. Stamped across the front in red ink were 3 words: "Return to sender, refused." I picked up another, and another, birthday cards, Christmas cards, graduation cards, thick envelopes that felt like they contained savings bonds or checks, all of them unopened, all of them refused. "I sent a letter every month," Evelyn said. "I sent gifts for every birthday. I sent a check for $5,000 when you turned 16 for a car. I sent $50,000 when you were accepted to Cascade State University. I looked up at her, clutching a rejected birthday card from my 7th year. Sabine told me we were broke, I whispered. She told me we couldn't afford college. She told me I had to work to pay for my keep. Evelyn's face hardened. Her expression shifted from sadness to a cold, terrifying rage. David has received a monthly stipend from the Horizons Trust for the last 25 years, she revealed. $15,000 a month, tax-free. It was conditional on him taking care of you. That was the agreement. I provided the money. He was supposed to provide the home. $15,000 a month. My head spun. I thought about the generic brand cereal. I thought about the thrift store clothes. I thought about my father claiming he couldn't afford a prom ticket. They had been taking $15,000 a month, money meant for the family, and hoarding it or spending it on themselves. They stole it, I said. They stole my life. They stole our time, Evelyn corrected. Sabine knew that if you and I ever met, if you ever stepped foot in my house and saw who I really was, her control would be broken. She gave David an ultimatum. It was her or me. David, being the weak man he is, chose the wife who dominates him. Why didn't you just come to the door? I asked. Why didn't you call the police? I tried, Evelyn said. She looked down at her hands. When you were 12, I hired a lawyer to petition for visitation. David countered by threatening to move you out of state. He said if I pushed, he would take you to Florida, and I would never see you again. I was terrified of losing track of you completely. So I made a deal with the devil. I kept paying them, hoping the money would at least buy you some comfort. I didn't know. Her voice broke. I didn't know they were treating you like a servant. I hoped they were at least kind. I looked at the pile of returned letters. They were the physical evidence of a love I had been starved of. I am the founder of Terra Link, Evelyn said suddenly, shifting gears. I am the sole beneficiary of the E.L. Horizons Trust. My net worth is currently estimated at $4.2 billion. She said the number casually, as if she were discussing the weather. I know, I said. I saw the file. That is how I found you. For a long time, Evelyn continued. The plan was for David to inherit. He is my only son. I thought that eventually he would grow a spine. I thought that eventually he would do right by you. But then I started watching. She pulled a folder from under her own papers. She slid it across the table. I opened it. It wasn't legal documents. It was press clippings. Local student wins math competition. Daisy Garcia. Accepts scholarship to Cascade State. Investigator Garcia exposes pension fraud ring. Senior investigator Daisy Garcia, named to state task force. I have a Google alert for your name, Evelyn said, a small, proud smile touching her lips. I have followed every step. I saw you leave that house with nothing. I saw you put yourself through school. I saw you become a woman who fights for the vulnerable. You are everything I wanted my son to be, and everything he is not. She leaned forward. 3 months ago, David came to see me. He didn't know I had been following your career. He told me you had gone off the rails. He said you were unstable. He asked for an advance on his inheritance to help you. He was lying, I said. I haven't spoken to him in 6 months. I know, Evelyn said. I refused him. I told him the tap was closed. I told him I was thinking of restructuring the trust. She paused, her eyes darkening. That is when they started the paperwork, she said. The guardianship. They want to declare me incompetent. They say I am senile. They say I am paranoid. They want to lock me away in a facility and take control of the board. They filed the motion 3 days ago, I said. I saw it. They think I am an old, helpless woman, Evelyn said. They think because I use a cane and don't go to gala dinners anymore, that I am weak. They are about to find out that I am not the victim. She signaled Arthur again. He stepped forward and placed a thick, leather-bound document in front of me. This is my new last will and testament, Evelyn said. And this? She placed a second document on top. is a durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances effective immediately. I looked at the cover page. My name was printed in bold letters. Agent, Daisy Garcia. I am removing David from the trust entirely, Evelyn stated. He gets nothing, no stipend, no inheritance. The house he lives in, it belongs to the trust. I am evicting him. Evelyn, I started, the name feeling strange on my tongue. Grandma, she corrected firmly. Call me Grandma. Grandma, I said, tears pricking my eyes. This is billions of dollars. You don't know me. I could be just like them. I could be here for the money. Evelyn reached across the table. Her hand, cool and dry, covered mine. She squeezed hard. I know you, she said fiercely. I know the girl who won a math competition and sat on the porch in the rain because she wasn't allowed to celebrate inside. I know the woman who works until 3 a.m. catching scammers to save people she has never met. You are the only person in this world who shares my blood and my values. She looked me dead in the eye. I need you. Daisy, I cannot fight them alone. They have lawyers. They have doctors on their payroll who will swear I am crazy. They are coming for me. I need a guardian. I need someone who knows the system, who knows how to fight bullies, and who isn't afraid of a little mud. She pushed the pen toward me. They spent 20 years making you feel like you were nothing, she said. Sign this, and you become the most powerful person in their world. Sign this, and we take them down, together. I looked at the pen. I looked at the wall of glass overlooking the city where I had struggled, scraped, and saved just to survive. I thought about Sabine's smirk. I thought about my father's silence. And then I thought about the woman sitting across from me, the woman who had kept a box of returned letters for 25 years, waiting for the day she could give them to me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just an investigator. I was an heir, and I was done running. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed my name. Daisy Garcia. I looked up at my grandmother. She was smiling, and in her eyes, I saw the reflection of my own fire. Okay, Grandma, I said. Let's go to court. Secrets are like currency. Their value depends entirely on circulation. And in a law firm as large as Whitmore and Associates, even with the strictest non-disclosure agreements, there is always someone willing to devalue the currency for a quick payout. The ink on the new will was barely dry, not even 24 hours old. When the war began, it started with a leak. A junior paralegal, buried under 6 figures of student debt, had seen the filing. He had seen the name Evelyn Lane, seen the valuation of the trust, and seen the name of the new power of attorney, Daisy Garcia. He had made a phone call, not to the press, not yet, but to the one person listed in the old file who would pay for the information, my father. I was in my kitchen, making toast, when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 6 months. Dad. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. For a second, I was 9 years old again, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell Sabine to stop. But I wasn't 9. I was 34, and I was holding a signed, durable power of attorney that gave me control over an empire. I swiped green. I needed to know what they knew. Daisy? His voice was thick with a performance of paternal concern. It was the voice he used when neighbors were watching. Soft, worried, bordering on pathetic. Hello, David, I said. I couldn't bring myself to call him Dad. Not anymore. Honey, I heard something troubling, he said. He paused, waiting for me to ask what it was. When I stayed silent, he cleared his throat. I heard you went to see Mother, at the lawyer's. I did, I said, taking a bite of my dry toast. Is that a crime? No, of course not, he stammered. It is just, well, Sabine and I are so worried. You know how Mother gets. She is confused. Daisy. She has these episodes. She doesn't know who people are half the time. We were just worried that maybe she confused you with someone else, or maybe she got agitated. She seemed perfectly lucid to me, I said. She knew exactly who I was. She knew exactly who you were, too. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, loaded silence. I could hear breathing in the background, sharp, shallow breaths. Sabine was listening. "Daisy," David said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. "Look, I know we have had our differences. I know you think we were hard on you growing up, but family is family, and we need to protect Mother. We heard rumors. Rumors that she signed some papers, financial papers." "So that is it," I said, leaning against the counter. "You are not worried about her health. You are worried about the trust." "I am worried that a senile woman is being taken advantage of," he snapped, the nice guy mask slipping. "Daisy, be reasonable. You are a financial investigator. You know how this looks. An estranged granddaughter suddenly shows up after 20 years and has a bewildered old woman sign over her fortune. It looks like a scam. It looks like elder abuse." The audacity took my breath away. He was projecting his own sins onto me with the precision of a cinema projector. "It is funny you mention abuse, David," I said, my voice cold. "Because we talked about that. We talked about the $15,000 a month she sent you. We talked about the letters you threw away. We talked about a lot of things." "She is lying." The voice didn't come from David. It came from the background, a shrill, piercing shriek. Sabine grabbed the phone. I could hear the fumble, the rustle of fabric. "Listen to me, you little ungrateful wretch," Sabine hissed. Her voice was pure venom, stripped of all its public sweetness. "You think you can just waltz back in here and steal what is ours? We took care of her. We managed her affairs. We earned that money." "You didn't earn a dime," I said. "You extorted it, and the gravy train is over. Sabine, the trust is locked. The monthly stipend is canceled, effective immediately. And the house? You might want to start looking for cardboard boxes. The eviction notice is being drafted this morning." "You wouldn't dare," she screamed. "I will ruin you. You hear me? I will destroy your career. I will tell the world what you really are. A thief. A manipulator. I will paint you as a predator so black you will never work in this state again." "Go ahead," I said. "I have the truth, and I have the receipts." I hung up. My hand was shaking. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. The battle lines were drawn. But I had underestimated Sabine. I thought her threat was just anger. I forgot that Sabine Lane didn't just get angry. She got strategic. She was a master of narrative control. She had spent 20 years convincing our neighbors I was a problem child. Now, she was going to convince the world I was a monster. The attack began 3 hours later. I walked into the bureau at 9 in the morning. The atmosphere was weird. People stopped talking when I walked by. Eyes averted, whispers behind hands. It felt like high school, but with badges and guns. "Garcia," the desk sergeant said, not looking at me. "Commander wants you, now." I walked into Holloway's office. She wasn't sitting behind her desk. She was standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot. On her desk was a stack of papers. "Sit down, Daisy," she said. Her voice was flat. I sat. "What is going on, Commander?" Holloway turned around. She looked tired. She picked up the stack of papers and dropped them in front of me. "These came in this morning," she said. "Sent to the ethics committee, sent to the district attorney, sent to the local news stations, sent to the mayor's office." I looked at the top paper. It was a formal complaint. Subject: Urgent report of professional misconduct and elder exploitation by investigator Daisy Garcia. It was anonymous, but it had Sabine's fingerprints all over it. The language was flowery, emotional, and damning. It claimed that I had used my badge to intimidate nursing home staff. It claimed I had accessed confidential databases to target wealthy elderly victims. It claimed I had a history of instability and greed. But the worst part was the second page. It was a copy of my high school guidance counselor's report, a report Sabine had influenced, labeling me as antisocial and prone to fabrication. "They are digging up dirt from when I was 15, I said, feeling the blood rush to my face. "Commander, you know this is retaliation. I told you this would happen." "I know," Holloway said. But the optics, Daisy, the optics are a nightmare. They sent this to the press. Channel 4 is already calling asking for a comment on the investigator investigation. They are spinning a story that you are a wolf in sheep's clothing, that you hunt scammers just to learn their tricks so you can use them on your own grandmother. It is a lie, I said. It doesn't matter if it is a lie right now, Holloway said. It matters that there is an official complaint. I have to follow protocol. Internal Affairs has to open a file. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a plastic bag. I need your badge, Daisy, and your service weapon. I stared at her. You are suspending me? Administrative leave, she corrected. Pending investigation. You are still paid, but you have no authority. You cannot access the database. You cannot enter the building until this is cleared. I slowly unclipped my badge. The metal felt warm in my hand. I had worked so hard for this. I had built my entire identity around this piece of tin. It was my shield, and Sabine had just stripped it away with a few emails. I placed the badge and my gun on the desk. This is exactly what they want, I said quietly. They want to weaken me before the court hearing. They want to argue that I am not fit to be a guardian because I am under investigation. Then win the hearing, Holloway said. Clear your name. Prove they are the frauds. If you bring me proof that they filed a false report, I will personally arrest them. But until then, my hands are tied. I walked out of the bureau feeling naked. I walked past the desks of colleagues I had worked with for 5 years. None of them made eye contact. Sabine had done it again. She had isolated me. But this time, I wasn't going home to cry in a notebook. I was going to the Obsidian Tower. When I arrived at the penthouse, the mood was frantic. Arthur Whitmore was on the phone, pacing the living room. Evelyn was sitting in a high-backed armchair by the fireplace, looking furious. They filed, Whitmore said, hanging up the phone as I walked in. Ex parte emergency guardianship. They are claiming Evelyn is in immediate physical danger. They are claiming you are isolating her and withholding medication. Withholding medication? I asked, throwing my bag on the sofa. I haven't even been in charge of her medical care for 24 hours. They have a doctor's affidavit, Whitmore said grimly. A Dr. Arins. He claims he saw Evelyn last week and she was severely disoriented. I have never met a Dr. Arins in my life, Evelyn snapped. She slammed her cane on the floor. They are buying witnesses. Arthur, they are paying people to lie. I know, Evelyn, Whitmore said soothingly, but the judge has granted a temporary hearing for tomorrow morning. We have 18 hours to prepare. Whitmore looked at me, then at Evelyn. He took a deep breath. Evelyn, he said cautiously, considering the aggressive nature of their attack, and considering the PR nightmare that is brewing with Daisy's job, maybe we should consider a settlement. No, I said. No, Evelyn said at the exact same time. We looked at each other. Hear me out, Whitmore pleaded. They want money. If we give them a lump sum, say $10 million, and let them keep the house, they will go away. We can seal the records. The complaints against Daisy will disappear. It stops the bleeding. $10 million? Evelyn asked, her voice low and dangerous. I would rather burn every dollar I have in the fireplace than give that woman one more cent. This is not about money. Arthur, it is about principle. They stole my son. They tortured my granddaughter. You do not negotiate with terrorists. But the risk, Whitmore argued. If the judge believes their doctor, if he believes Daisy is unstable, they could win. They could put you in a facility, Evelyn, a lockdown memory care unit. Is that a risk you are willing to take? The room went silent. The threat was real. If we lost, Evelyn wouldn't just lose her money. She would lose her freedom, and I would lose everything. Evelyn looked at me. Daisy, you are the one with the target on your back. You lost your badge today because of me. Do you want to settle? I thought about the shame of walking out of the bureau. I thought about the 15 years of silence. I thought about the little girl who thought she was unlovable because her stepmother told her so. If we settle, I said, my voice steady, they win. They get to keep telling the story that they are the victims. They get to keep their reputation. They get to keep thinking they can hurt people and get paid for it. I walked over to the table where the legal files were spread out. I am an investigator, I said. That is what I do. They fabricated a doctor's note? Let's find the dirt on the doctor. They claim I am unstable? Let's pull their financial records and show the judge exactly why they are so desperate for this guardianship. They want to play dirty? Fine, I know how to play in the mud. I looked at Whitmore. No settlement, we go to court, and we don't just defend, we attack. Evelyn smiled. It was a shark's smile. That is my girl, she said. We spent the next 12 hours turning the penthouse into a war room. I couldn't use the Bureau's database, but I didn't need it. I knew how to find public records. I knew how to find social media footprints. I dug into Dr. Arinzi. It took me 3 hours, but I found it. He had 2 malpractice suits pending in a neighboring county. He was deep in debt to a gambling casino in Nevada. He was vulnerable. I dug into the anonymous witnesses Sabine had lined up. A neighbor who claimed I yelled at Evelyn? I found her Facebook page. She was Sabine's bridge partner. I was building a web of connections, a map of their conspiracy. But while I worked, my phone kept buzzing. Notifications from social media. Sabine had taken her narrative online. There were posts on community forums. Heartbroken for the Lane family, praying for justice against elder abuse. It is so sad when children turn on their parents for money. The comments were vicious. People who didn't know me were calling for my arrest. People were analyzing my appearance in photos, saying I had crazy eyes. I forced myself not to respond. I forced myself to focus on the data. At 2 a.m, my father sent one last text. It is not too late. Daisy, just sign the rights back to us. We can make the investigation go away. Don't throw your life away for a woman you don't even know. I looked at Evelyn, who was asleep in her chair, a blanket draped over her legs. She looked small and frail in her sleep, her breathing shallow. But earlier, when she was awake, she was a titan. She was the only person who had ever fought for me. I typed my reply to David. I will see you in court. I turned off my phone. The morning was coming fast. The judge, the press, the lies. They were bringing an army to destroy me. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought they were fighting the scared little girl from Elm Street. They didn't realize they were fighting a woman who had spent 10 years learning exactly how to catch liars. And tomorrow, I wasn't just going to catch them, I was going to expose them. The digital clock on the microwave in Evelyn's penthouse kitchen blinked 3 a.m. The city of Kingsport was asleep, a sprawling grid of darkness and scattered streetlights below us. But inside the dining room, the lights were blazing. I had turned the long mahogany table into a crime scene board. Stacks of bank statements, printed emails, and legal drafts covered every inch of the polished wood. This was my element. Give me a chaotic jumble of numbers and dates, and I will give you a narrative. I will give you a motive. I will give you the truth. But usually, the truth didn't make me want to vomit. I had spent the last 6 hours building a chronological timeline. In criminal investigations, we call this the life cycle of the fraud. You map the money against the behavior. You look for the triggers. You look for the moment the predator gets hungry. I started with the bank statements from the EL, Horizons Trust, going back 25 years. Okay, I whispered to myself, uncapping a red marker. Let us follow the money. The first entry was dated 2 months after my mother died. A wire transfer of $15,000 from the trust to a joint account held by David and Sabine Lane. The memo line simply read, Support. I traced the line with my finger. $15,000, every single month, like clockwork. I did the math in my head. $15,000 a month for 25 years. That was $180,000 a year. Over the course of my life, my father had received nearly $4.5 million from the mother he claimed was dead. My hand shook as I wrote the total on a notepad. $4.5 million. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in the living room on Elm Street. I was 12 years old, shivering because the heating was kept at 62 degrees to save money. I was wearing sneakers with holes in the toes because Sabine said we had to wait for the clearance sales. I remembered the way my father would sigh over the grocery bill, acting as if buying fresh fruit was a luxury that would bankrupt us. They weren't poor, they were rich. They were pulling in a salary that put them in the top 5% of earners in the state, and they were doing it without lifting a finger. So where did it go? I pulled the credit card statements I had subpoenaed. Well, technically, I hadn't subpoenaed them yet, but I had accessed the shared family credit report David had foolishly added me to when I was 18 to build my credit score. I still had the login. I matched the dates. June 2005, a transfer of $15,000 comes in from Evelyn. 3 days later, a charge of $12,000 to a luxury travel agency, the Amalfi Coast. I remembered that summer. They went to Italy for 2 weeks. They left me at a neighbor's house, telling me it was a second honeymoon, and they couldn't afford a ticket for a child. They came back with tanned skin and leather luggage. August 2010, another transfer, another charge. Mercedes-Benz of Kingsport. Down payment. Sabine got a new car that year. She told me it was a lease, a special deal because David knew the manager. It wasn't a lease. They bought it with my grandmother's money. The pattern was sickeningly clear. The money Evelyn sent, money that was explicitly intended to support the family, to support me, was immediately siphoned off into luxury goods for David and Sabine. I was just the excuse they used to cash the check. But then, the pattern changed. I moved to the section of the table representing 5 years ago. The monthly transfers stopped being automatic. They became erratic. Sometimes they were late. Sometimes they were for odd amounts. I picked up a printed email thread from that time. It was between David and an account manager at the bank where the trust was held. From David Lane. Subject: Urgent transfer request. Body: We have unexpected medical expenses for Daisy. She needs a specialist. Please release an additional $50,000 immediately. I stared at the paper. 5 years ago, I was 29. I was healthy. I had my own insurance through the bureau. I hadn't asked them for a dime. You liars, I hissed into the empty room. I looked at the response from the bank. Dear Mr. Lane, per Ms. Evelyn's instructions, all requests exceeding the monthly stipend require direct verification. Please have Ms. Daisy call us to confirm. David never replied. The request died there. That was the turning point. That was when Evelyn started to wake up. She must have realized they were using my name to drain the accounts. She started tightening the leash. And that was when Sabine got vicious. I found a notation in the bank's compliance log, a document Evelyn's lawyer had included in the discovery file. It was an incident report filed by a branch manager named Sarah Jenkins. Date: October 14th, 2020. Subject: Customer interaction. Sabine Lane. Notes: Mrs. Sabine Lane attempted to access the safe deposit box registered to Evelyn Lane. She claimed to have verbal permission. When informed that power of attorney was required, Mrs. Lane became verbally abusive. She slammed her hands on the counter and shouted, "That old witch owes us. She is rotting in that penthouse while we do all the work." Mrs. Lane was escorted out by security. Recommended flagging account for potential elder coercion. Got you, I whispered. Sabine had tried to raid the vaults. When the monthly allowance wasn't enough to feed her lifestyle, she tried to go for the principal, and when that failed, she went for the throat. I shifted my attention to the stack of emails between Sabine and Evelyn. Evelyn had printed these out herself, keeping them in a folder marked Evidence of Harassment. Reading them felt like touching a live wire. Date: November 3rd, 2021. From Sabine Lane. To Evelyn Lane. Subject: Daisy. Evelyn. David is very upset. He is trying to protect you, but you are making it very difficult. We know you are lonely. We know you want to see Daisy. She asks about you. You know, she asks why her grandmother doesn't love her. It breaks my heart to tell her the truth, that you are just too sick to see her right now. If you sign the loan guarantee for the beach property, we think it would be a great environment for a family reunion. Daisy would love the ocean. Don't you want to see her before it is too late? Just sign the papers attached, for Daisy's sake. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. They held me hostage. They knew the one thing Evelyn wanted was a relationship with me, and they dangled it in front of her like a carrot. Sign the loan, get the girl, release the funds, see the granddaughter. And when Evelyn refused, they punished her by telling me she was dead. They punished her by returning her letters. I walked over to the archival box, the one filled with the unopened mail. I needed to see the other side of the conversation. I picked up a letter dated from the same month as Sabine's email. The envelope was crumpled, as if it had been gripped by shaking hands. It was stamped, "Return to sender." I carefully slid it open. "My darling Daisy, Sabine tells me you are angry with me. She says you do not want to see me because I am too old and embarrassing. I hope you know that isn't true. I hope you know I am fighting to get to you. I refuse the loan, not because I don't want to see you, but because I know they are using you. I will not let them sell your future to buy a beach house. Please, if you get this, call me. I just want to hear your voice. Love, Grandma." I lowered the letter. A sob caught in my throat, sharp and painful. Sabine had played us both. She told me Evelyn was dead so I wouldn't look for her. She told Evelyn I hated her so she wouldn't keep reaching out. She built a wall of silence and charged admission to peek over it. And David? My father? I found a draft document in the bottom of the pile. It was dated just 6 months ago. Petition for voluntary conservatorship. It was a legal contract transferring full control of the Horizons Trust to David Lane. It stripped Evelyn of her right to vote on the board of her own company. It gave David the power to liquidate assets, sell real estate, and manage all cash flows. Attached to it was a sticky note in my father's handwriting. "Mom, just sign it. Sabine is losing patience. If you do this, we can stop the fighting. We can be a family again. If you don't, I cannot promise I will be able to visit anymore." It was extortion, pure and simple. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who I thought was just weak, was a monster. He had threatened to abandon his own mother if she didn't hand over her billions. And when she refused, when she finally said no, they filed the emergency guardianship petition claiming she was insane. If they couldn't trick her into giving up the money, they were going to use the court system to steal it. I stepped back from the table. The timeline was complete. It wasn't just a financial crime. It was a 20-year conspiracy of emotional abuse, fraud, and isolation. I looked at the chart I had made. Victim 1, Evelyn Lane. Financial loss, $4.5 million. Emotional damages, loss of relationship with granddaughter. Victim 2, Daisy Garcia. Financial loss, destitute childhood, emotional damages, systematic gaslighting. I wasn't just the investigator anymore. I was the evidence. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the court docket system. A new document had been uploaded by Graham Cole, my father's lawyer, in preparation for the morning hearing. I opened it. It was a character statement from Sabine. Daisy Garcia has always been a troubled child. We tried our best, but she has a history of pathological lying and delusions of grandeur. We believe she has manipulated Evelyn Lane into believing a fantasy where we are the villains, simply to gain access to the family fortune she believes she was denied. I stared at the screen. They were still doing it. They were still spinning the web. But this time, they had made a fatal error. They thought they were fighting a family dispute. They didn't realize they had just handed a forensic financial investigator the most complete paper trail of embezzlement I had ever seen. I picked up my phone and dialed Naomi, my lawyer. It was 4 a.m. I didn't care. "Daisy?" she answered, her voice groggy. "Is everything okay?" "I need you to add a witness to our list for tomorrow," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. "Who?" Naomi asked. "Me," I said, "and I need you to subpoena the bank records from First National, specifically the compliance logs from October 2020, and I need a projector." "A projector?" "Yes," I said, looking at the timeline of betrayal spread out before me. "Because I am not just going to tell the judge what they did. I am going to show him. I am going to show him every dollar, every lie, and every year they stole. Daisy, Naomi said, waking up fully now. If we do this, if you present this evidence, you are accusing your father of a felony. This isn't just a civil case anymore. You are sending him to prison. I looked at the letter in my hand, the letter where my grandmother begged to hear my voice, a letter my father had allowed to be thrown in the trash. He made his choice, I said. He chose the money over his mother and his daughter. Now he can pay the bill. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was a new day. For 20 years, I had been writing in my notebook, cataloging the small cruelties of my life, thinking they were just the random misfortunes of an unloved child. I finally understood that those weren't random. They were line items in a budget. My pain had been their business model. I turned back to the room. I gathered the papers. I organized the files. I was ready. David and Sabine wanted a war. They wanted to talk about family values. I was about to give them a lesson in family values they would never forget. The next morning, the courthouse steps looked less like a hall of justice and more like a red carpet for a premiere of a horror movie where I was the monster. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement, but that didn't stop the circus. Satellite trucks from 3 different news stations were parked illegally on the curb. A crowd of onlookers, some curious locals, some hired bodies holding placards that read, "Justice for the Lane family," pressed against the barricades. As I stepped out of Naomi's car, the flashbulbs erupted. It was a physical assault, a wall of blinding white light. Daisy, is it true you held your grandmother hostage? Daisy, did you forge the will? Ms. Garcia, look this way. Do you have any comment on the abuse allegations? I kept my head down, staring at the wet concrete, but I couldn't block out the sight of the newspaper stand near the entrance, the Kingsport Gazette. A tabloid that usually focused on alien abductions, had a full-page photo of me on the cover. It was a picture taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, likely yesterday when I was arguing with the security guard at the bureau. My face was twisted in anger, my hand raised. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "The Predator." Granddaughter, how a rogue investigator targeted her own family. Sabine had been busy. She hadn't just leaked the story, she had directed it. Inside courtroom 304. The atmosphere was poisonous. The gallery was packed. Half the people I recognized from the neighborhood, people who had watched me grow up, people who had bought into Sabine's troubled child narrative for 20 years. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. David and Sabine were already seated at the plaintiff's table. They were holding hands. Sabine was wearing a soft, pastel cardigan and no makeup, making her look 10 years older and infinitely more fragile. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. David looked like a man marching to the gallows, pale and sweating, but he didn't pull his hand away from hers. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Mercer took his seat. He looked tired. He looked at me, then at the packed gallery, and finally at the lawyers. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the guardianship of Evelyn Lane," Mercer said. "We are here to determine temporary capacity and safety. Mr. Cole, you may proceed." Graham Cole stood up. He didn't pace this time. He stood still, radiating a grave, heavy solemnity. "Your Honor," Cole began, his voice low and resonant, "we are not here today to talk about money. The Lane family does not care about the money. We are here to talk about a tragedy of the mind. We are here to save a confused elderly woman from a predator who knows exactly how to manipulate the system because she helped build it." He turned to look at me. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Daisy Garcia is a professional," Cole said. "She is a senior financial investigator. She knows the law, she knows the loopholes, and most dangerously, she knows how to construct a narrative. She has spent her entire career hunting criminals, and in doing so, she has learned their tricks. She has learned how to isolate a victim. She has learned how to forge capacity documents. She has learned how to take a chaotic situation and twist it until up is down and black is white. I gripped the edge of the table. Naomi placed a hand on my arm, squeezing gently. Don't react. Her grip said, that is what they want. We will show, Cole continued, that Ms. Garcia, having been estranged from the family due to her own behavioral issues for over 15 years, suddenly reappeared the moment she discovered the true value of the Lane estate. We will show that she used her badge to intimidate care staff, and we will show that Evelyn Lane, a woman suffering from advanced cognitive decline, was coerced into signing documents she could not possibly understand. Call your first witness, Judge Mercer said. We call Mrs. Linda Halloway, Cole said. My head snapped up. Linda Halloway? My father's cousin. A woman I hadn't seen since I was 12. A woman who lived in Idaho. Linda walked to the stand. She looked nervous, glancing at Sabine for reassurance. Sabine gave her a small, tragic nod. Mrs. Halloway, Cole said, can you describe Daisy's relationship with her family growing up? Oh, it was terrible, Linda said, shaking her head. She was a very difficult child, angry, always screaming. I remember visiting once when she was 10. Sabine was trying so hard to be a mother to her, cooking dinner, cleaning up, and Daisy she would sit there and glare. She wouldn't speak. It was chilling, honestly, like she was plotting something. Did she ever lie? Cole asked. Constantly, Linda said. She would make up stories about Sabine. She would tell people she was being starved, or that she was made to sleep in the basement. It was all fantasy. Sabine is a saint. She dedicated her life to that girl. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. Liar. I wanted to scream it. I wanted to stand up and shout that Linda had visited exactly twice in 10 years, and both times Sabine had bribed me with a trip to the movies to stay out of the house. Thank you, Cole said. No further questions. Naomi stood up to cross-examine. Mrs. Halloway, when was the last time you saw Daisy Garcia? Linda blinked. At her high school graduation. I think, or maybe before that. So, 16 years ago? Naomi asked. I suppose. And you are testifying to her character as a 34-year-old woman based on your memories of a 10-year-old child? Some people don't change, Linda sniffed. Objection, Naomi said. Speculation. Sustained, Mercer muttered. Step down. It went on like that for hours. A parade of character assassins. A neighbor who saw me arguing with David in the driveway 5 years ago. A former teacher who remembered I was withdrawn and secretive. They were painting a portrait of a sociopath, using the very survival mechanisms I had developed, my silence, my withdrawal, my note-taking, as evidence of my depravity. Then came the heavy artillery. The plaintiffs called Dr. Marcus Arinze, Cole announced. Dr. Arinze walked in. He was a slick man in an expensive suit, smelling of cologne and arrogance. He sat on the stand and adjusted his tie. Dr. Arinze, Cole said, you examined Evelyn Lane last week, is that correct? I did, Arinze said, at the request of her son, David. And what was your conclusion? Mrs. Seat is suffering from advanced vascular dementia, Arinze stated confidently. She exhibited significant paranoia. She believed her son was stealing from her. She believed her staff was spying on her. These are classic symptoms of persecutory delusions. In your professional opinion, was she competent to sign a new will or power of attorney 3 days ago? Absolutely not, Arinze said. Her cognitive faculties are severely compromised. She would be highly susceptible to undue influence. If someone, say a person she perceived as an ally against her enemies, put a paper in front of her, she would sign it. I looked at the jury box. Well, there was no jury for this hearing, just the judge. But I looked at Mercer. He was taking notes. He looked concerned. Arinze was lying. I knew he was lying. But on the record, he was a medical expert. Naomi stood up. Dr. Arinze, are you board certified in geriatrics? I am a general neurologist, Arinze deflected. And how long was your examination of Mrs. Lane? Approximately 45 minutes. 45 minutes, Naomi repeated. To diagnose advanced dementia? Did you administer the Montreal Cognitive Assessment? I performed a clinical interview, Arinze said stiffly. Sometimes tests are not necessary when the symptoms are this obvious. Obvious, Naomi said. Like her running a billion-dollar company? Because she attended a board meeting via Zoom 2 weeks ago. People with dementia can have moments of clarity, Arinze said, not missing a beat. It is called sundowning. They fluctuate, but the underlying disease is there. Naomi sat down. She hadn't landed a knockout blow. Arinze was good at this. He was a paid gun. Your Honor, Cole said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. We would like to call the respondent, Daisy Garcia, to the stand. My heart stopped. This was it. The trap. I walked to the witness stand. My legs felt like lead. I swore to tell the truth, sat down, and looked at Graham Cole. He looked like a wolf who had just cornered a rabbit. Ms. Garcia, Cole started, his voice deceptively soft. You are an investigator, correct? Yes, I said. You specialize in financial crimes. You know how to hide money. You know how to create shell companies. You know how to make assets disappear. I know how to find them, I corrected. I investigate crimes. I don't commit them. Semantics. Cole waved his hand. The skill set is the same. A lockpick can be used by a thief or a locksmith. It depends on the intent, doesn't it? He walked closer to the stand. Let's talk about your intent. Ms. Garcia, you claim you want to protect your grandmother, but you haven't seen her in 20 years. You didn't even send a Christmas card. My letters were returned, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Sabine returned them. So you say, Cole said. Or maybe you just didn't care. Until you found the name Horizon Trust in a database. You admit you accessed confidential federal files to find your grandmother, don't you? I stumbled across it, I stammered. It was part of another investigation. So you misused government resources for personal gain? Cole snapped. You violated the privacy of a federal investigation to look up your rich relative? I was doing my job, I said, my voice rising. And then you contacted her, Cole pressed. You swooped in. You told a lonely, sick old woman that her son, her only son, who has cared for her for decades, was a thief. You poisoned her mind against her own family. I told her the truth, I shot back. I told her they were stealing $15,000 a month. According to whom? Cole shouted. According to your paranoid interpretation of standard family support? David Lane is her son. She gave him that money. It was a gift. But you twisted it. You made it look like a crime. He walked back to his table and picked up a thin blue folder. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit D. This is a psychological evaluation of Daisy Garcia, conducted by the Kingsport School District when she was 14 years old. I froze. I remembered that evaluation. Sabine had forced me to go after I refused to do chores for a week. Objection! Naomi stood up. This is a 20-year-old document. It is irrelevant. It goes to the witness's long-standing history of delusional behavior, Cole argued. It is highly relevant to her credibility. Overruled, Judge Mercer said. I will allow it. Cole opened the folder. He smiled. Dr. Benz, the school psychologist, wrote, Daisy exhibits signs of oppositional defiant disorder and paranoid ideation. She keeps a notebook where she records innocent interactions with her parents as evidence of abuse. She is unable to distinguish between normal parental discipline and persecution. Cole looked at me. The courtroom was silent. You kept a notebook, didn't you, Daisy? He asked softly. A little book of hate, where you wrote down every time your stepmother asked you to clean your room, and you called it slavery. You have been building a case against your family since you were 9 years old. You are not an investigator. Ms. Garcia, you are a woman obsessed with revenge, and you are using a senile old woman to get it. It wasn't innocent, I cried out. The composure I had held on to for hours shattered. She didn't just ask me to clean my room. She made me scrub the floor with a toothbrush. She told me I was garbage. She told me my mother died because she didn't want me. So you admit you hate her? Cole pounced. You admit you harbor deep resentment toward Sabine Lane? Yes, I hate her, I screamed. The echo of my scream bounced off the wood paneling. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Daisy Garcia snaps in court, admits hatred. Cole smiled, a cold, victorious smile. No further questions. Your Honor, the defense rests. We have established that the respondent is hostile, biased, has a history of paranoia, and has misused her professional position to isolate a vulnerable adult. I sat there, breathing hard, my chest heaving. I had walked right into it. He had goaded me until the angry, hurt child inside me took the wheel, and he had used that child to destroy the credibility of the woman. I stepped down from the stand. I walked back to the table. I couldn't look at Naomi. I couldn't look at the judge. I looked at Sabine. She wasn't crying anymore. She was looking at me over her tissue, and her eyes were dancing. I told you. Her look said, "No one is going to put up with you." Judge Mercer cleared his throat. "The court will recess for the day," he said. "I have heard significant testimony regarding Miss Garcia's suitability as a guardian. I must say, the allegations of professional misconduct and the admitted animosity toward the family are concerning. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 for the closing arguments and my ruling." He banged the gavel. I felt sick, physically sick. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the courtroom as fast as I could, ignoring the shouts of the reporters. Naomi caught up with me in the corridor, grabbing my elbow and pulling me into a quiet alcove near the restrooms. "Daisy, stop," she said. "I lost," I said, my voice trembling. "I lost. Naomi." He twisted everything. He made me look crazy. He made the truth look like a delusion. Mercer is going to rule against us. He is going to give them the guardianship. They are going to lock Evelyn away, and I will never see her again. I leaned my head against the cool stone wall. Tears were burning my eyes. "They used my notebook," I whispered. "The only thing that saved me. They used it to kill me." Naomi grabbed my shoulders and turned me to face her. Her expression wasn't defeated. It was fierce. "Daisy, listen to me," she said sharp and low. "You didn't lose. You just took the first punch. That is all this was. They threw everything they had. They played their ace card, the character assassination." "It worked," I said. "Only if we let it," Naomi said. "They focused entirely on you. Did you notice that? They spent 4 hours talking about your childhood, your temper, your job. They barely talked about the money. They barely talked about the bank transfers." She pulled a file out of her briefcase. It was the timeline I had built the night before. "Graham Cole thinks he is trying a family law case," Naomi said, a dangerous glint in her eye. "He thinks this is about feelings, and she said, he doesn't realize he's standing in the middle of a forensic audit." She handed me the file. "You are emotional. Daisy, good. Be emotional. But tomorrow, you don't walk in there as the angry daughter. You walk in there as the investigator. We don't need to prove you are a saint. We just need to prove they are criminals." She looked at her watch. "We have 12 hours. We have the projector. We have the bank records. And we have one witness they didn't call. One witness they think is too far gone to speak." "Evelyn," I said. "Graham claimed she was incompetent," Naomi said. "He claimed she doesn't know where she is. Tomorrow, we are going to bring her in, and we are going to let her tell Judge Mercer exactly who the predator is." I took a deep breath. The shame of the cross-examination was still burning my skin, but beneath it, the cold, hard resolve was coming back. "They think they broke me," I said. "Let them think that," Naomi said. "It will make the look on Sabine's face tomorrow so much sweeter." I straightened my jacket. I wiped the tears from my face. I looked at the file in my hand. "Tomorrow isn't a hearing," I said. "It is an indictment." "Now you are talking," Naomi said. "Let's go to work." The next morning, the air in the courtroom had shifted. It was no longer the heated, emotional atmosphere of a family feud. It was cold, sterile, and precise. It was the atmosphere of an autopsy. I sat at the defendant's table, but I wasn't wringing my hands or looking at the floor. I was sitting with my spine straight, a pen in my hand, and a stack of color-coded files arranged in front of me with geometric precision. I wasn't Daisy the unwanted daughter today. I was Investigator Garcia, badge number 4922, and I was about to dismantle a crime ring. Graham Cole looked confident, perhaps too confident. He smirked at Naomi as he arranged his papers, likely thinking he had buried us yesterday with the psychological evaluation. He didn't notice the projector screen Naomi had set up in the corner of the room. He didn't notice the heavy banker's boxes stacked under our table. "Court is in session," Judge Mercer announced. "Ms. Vega, you may call your first witness." "The defense calls Dr. Richard Sterling," Naomi said. A murmur went through the gallery. Sterling wasn't just a doctor. He was the chief of neurology at University Hospital. He was the kind of expert you called when you needed to know if a world leader was fit for office. Sterling took the stand. He looked like a man who had no time for nonsense. "Dr. Sterling," Naomi began, "did you have occasion to examine Evelyn Lane?" "I did," Sterling said. "I examined her yesterday evening for 3 hours. I administered a full battery of cognitive tests, including the mini mental state examination and the Montreal Cognitive Assessment." "And what were the results?" "Mrs. Lane scored a 30 out of 30 on the mini mental," Sterling stated. "She is in the 99th percentile for cognitive function for her age group. She is sharp, articulate, and fully oriented to time, place, and person. To suggest she has dementia is not just a misdiagnosis, it is medical malpractice." I saw Graham Cole stiffen. He whispered something furiously to Sabine. "Dr. Sterling," Naomi continued, "is it possible for a patient with advanced vascular dementia, as Dr. Arenzi claimed, to score a perfect 30? "Impossible," Sterling said flatly. "You cannot fake cognitive health. You can fake sickness, but you cannot fake brilliance." "Thank you," Naomi said. Cole tried to cross-examine, asking if Evelyn could be having a good day, but Sterling shut him down with a lecture on neuroplasticity that left the room silent. The foundation of their case, that Evelyn was crazy, had just developed a massive crack. "The defense calls Theodore Vance, forensic accountant," Naomi announced. Vance was a colleague of mine from the bureau. He walked in carrying a laptop. He plugged it into the projector. "Mr. Vance," Naomi said, "you have reviewed the financial records of the E.L. Horizons Trust and the personal accounts of David and Sabine Lane?" "I have," Vance said. "Please show the court your findings." The room darkened. A beam of light hit the screen. It was a line graph. A bright red line zigzagged across the grid. "This," Vance said, using a laser pointer, "represents the monthly transfers from Evelyn Lane to David Lane over the last 25 years. As you can see, the base amount is $15,000 per month." A gasp rippled through the gallery. $15,000. In a working-class city like Kingsport, that was a fortune. "And this," Vance clicked the remote, bringing up a second chart, "represents the spending habits of David and Sabine Lane." "Objection!" Cole shouted. "Relevance! How my clients spend their money is their business." "It goes to motive, Your Honor," Naomi said calmly. "They claim they are acting out of love. We are proving they are acting out of greed." "Overruled," Mercer said, leaning forward. "Proceed." Vance walked through the chart. It was brutal. June 2005. Transfer received. $15,000. 3 days later. Luxury vacation to Italy. $12,000. August 2010. Transfer received. $15,000. Same day. Down payment on a Mercedes-Benz for Sabine Lane. I watched my father. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. He looked like a man watching his house burn down. "In total," Vance said, "over the last 25 years, David and Sabine Lane have received approximately $4,500,000 from the woman they are now trying to declare incompetent. During this same period, they claim to the respondent Daisy Garcia, that they were living in poverty and could not afford basic necessities like college tuition or heating. $4.5 million, Judge Mercer repeated slowly. He looked at David. It wasn't a friendly look. Now, Naomi said, stepping into the center of the room, let us talk about the relationship between the grandmother and the granddaughter. The plaintiffs claim Daisy Garcia abandoned her family. They claim she never reached out. She turned to me. Daisy, did you try to contact your father? I stood up. I called him on his birthday 3 years ago, I said clearly. I left a voicemail. I kept the recording because I keep everything. Naomi nodded to the clerk, who pressed play on the audio system. My father's voice filled the courtroom. It sounded slurred, heavy with drink. Daisy, it is Dad. Look, I saw you called. I cannot talk right now. Sabine is really upset. You know how she gets. She thinks if I talk to you, I am choosing sides. I have to keep the peace. Honey, she says if I let you back in, Mom might cut us off. We need that money. Just stay away for a while, okay? For me. The silence that followed was deafening. We need that money, Naomi repeated. Not we love you, not we miss you. We need that money. Sabine was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. We have one more witness regarding the character of Sabine Lane, Naomi said. We call Sarah Higgins. Sarah was a waitress at the diner on Main, a place we used to go to on Sundays because it was cheap. She was in her 50s now, wiping her hands on her skirt as she took the stand. Mrs. Higgins, Naomi said, do you recognize the woman at the plaintiff's table? I do, Sarah said, glaring at Sabine. That is Mrs. Lane. She used to come in with her husband and that poor little girl. Did you ever witness an interaction that concerned you? I will never forget it, Sarah said. It was the girl's birthday, maybe her 12th. She ordered a milkshake. Mrs. Lane snatched it away before she could take a sip. She told the girl, right there in front of the whole lunch rush, you are getting fat. Daisy, no one loves a fat girl. You will drink water. Then she poured the milkshake into the trash can. The look on that child's face. It broke my heart. The husband just sat there eating his eggs. Thank you, Naomi said. Graham Cole didn't even cross-examine. He knew the jury, the judge, in this case, was turning. The narrative of the saintly stepmother was dead. Finally, Naomi said, walking to the archival box I had brought, we would like to submit into evidence Exhibit F, the correspondence. She lifted the lid. She started pulling out the letters, the yellowed envelopes, the birthday cards, the graduation gifts. These are 312 letters, Naomi said, stacking them on the judge's bench. Written by Evelyn Lane to her granddaughter. Every single one of them is stamped, Return to Sender. Every single one was refused by the household of David and Sabine Lane. She picked up a specific letter. This one contained a check for $50,000 for Daisy's college tuition. It was returned on the same day Sabine Lane told Daisy they had no money to help her. Judge Mercer picked up the envelope. He ran his thumb over the red stamp. Mr. Cole, the judge said, his voice low. Are you telling me your clients intercepted financial aid intended for the respondent while simultaneously taking millions for themselves? Your Honor, there is no proof my clients were the ones who returned them. Cole stammered. It could have been a clerical error. 312 clerical errors? Mercer asked. Actually, Your Honor, Naomi interrupted, we have proof of intent, and this is our final piece of evidence. She pulled a single sheet of paper from a plastic sleeve. This is an email recovered from Sabine Lane's personal account, dated 4 years ago. It was sent to a user on a legal advice forum. Naomi cleared her throat and began to read. Subject: How to gain guardianship of a wealthy relative. Body: My mother-in-law is getting old. She controls a lot of money. She threatens to cut us off if we don't let her see her granddaughter. The granddaughter is estranged. We made sure of that. What is the easiest way to declare the old woman incompetent so we can take control of the trust without the granddaughter finding out? We need to act before she changes her will. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing so fast it sounded like heavy rain. Sabine let out a gasp that sounded like a dying animal. David put his head in his hands. Graham Cole closed his eyes. He knew it was over. That email was the smoking gun. It proved premeditation. It proved malice. It proved that the entire guardianship petition was a fraud designed to facilitate theft. This email, Naomi said, her voice ringing out like a bell, was sent from the IP address registered to the Lane household. It is the blueprint for the crime we are witnessing today. I looked at Sabine. For the first time in 25 years, she looked small. She looked terrified. The monster under my bed was just a greedy, pathetic woman who had been caught. Judge Mercer held up his hand to silence the room. He looked at the stack of returned letters. He looked at the financial charts. He looked at the email. Then he looked at me. His expression had changed completely. Gone was the suspicion from yesterday. In its place was something like respect, and perhaps a deep, profound apology. He saw me now, not as the angry, unstable girl Graham Cole had painted, but as the investigator who had systematically, methodically exposed the people who had tormented her. I have seen enough documents, Judge Mercer said. He pushed the files aside. I have heard the doctors. I have seen the money trails, but in cases of guardianship, the most important voice is often the one we silence. He looked at the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. I understand that Evelyn Lane is present in the building. She is, Your Honor, Naomi said. She is waiting in the witness room. Bring her in, Mercer ordered. I want to hear from the woman herself. Graham Cole stood up halfway. Your Honor, we object. As Dr. Arinzi stated, the stress could cause a psychotic break. Sit down, Mr. Cole, Mercer snapped. Unless you want me to hold you in contempt for continuing to push a medical diagnosis that has been proven false. Cole sat down. The bailiff opened the doors. The room went completely silent. Even the reporter stopped moving. Evelyn Lane walked in. She wasn't using a wheelchair. She wasn't wearing a hospital gown. She was wearing a navy blue Chanel suit that cost more than my father's car. She walked with a cane, yes, but her posture was regal. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the room until they landed on David and Sabine. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a queen returning to execute traitors. She walked down the center aisle, the tap of her cane echoing against the floorboards. She passed my table. She paused for a fraction of a second, her hand brushing my shoulder, a touch of solidarity, of pride. Then she walked to the witness stand, climbed the steps, and sat down. She adjusted the microphone. Good morning, Your Honor, she said. Her voice was clear, strong, and dripping with authority. I believe my son and his wife have been telling you some fairy tales about me. Judge Mercer leaned back in his chair. Good morning, Mrs. Lane. The floor is yours. I looked at my father. He was trembling violently now. He knew what was coming. He had spent his whole life underestimating two women, the mother he exploited and the daughter he abandoned. Now, both of us were in the room, and we were holding the match. Graham Cole was sweating. I could see the sheen of perspiration on his forehead under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom. He stood up, smoothing his tie, desperate to regain control of a narrative that was rapidly spiraling into disaster. Your Honor, Cole stammered, his voice losing its polished baritone quality. We must object. Mrs. Zallan is a fragile woman, subjecting her to the stress of testimony, after Dr. Arinzi's diagnosis, would be cruel. We ask that she be excused from the stand for her own medical safety. Judge Mercer looked over his spectacles at Cole. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Because at that moment, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud. Evelyn Lane did not look fragile. She did not look like a woman who needed saving. She walked into the courtroom with the energy of a Category 5 hurricane contained within a Chanel suit. She gripped her cane not as a support, but as a scepter. Her chin was high, her eyes were sharp, and as she walked down the center aisle, the silence in the room was absolute. She passed the plaintiff's table. She didn't look at David. She didn't look at Sabine. She looked straight ahead at the judge, her gaze unwavering. She ascended the witness stand steps without assistance, sat down, and adjusted the microphone. "I am 80 years old. Mr. Cole," Evelyn said, her voice clear and cutting through the room like a bell. "I am not dead, and I am certainly not silent. If you are quite finished discussing my health with a doctor who spent less than an hour in my presence, I would like to speak." Judge Mercer leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Proceed, Mrs. Lane." Evelyn turned her chair slightly so she could address the entire room. "For 25 years," she began, "I have lived with a broken heart. I believed that my son, David, was simply weak. I believed he was a man dominated by a strong wife, and I pitied him. I sent him money, $15,000 a month, because I thought that money would buy safety for my granddaughter. I thought I was paying a ransom to keep a roof over her head." She paused, and her eyes finally locked onto Sabine. "But I was not just a passive observer. I was a businesswoman, and when you are in business, you learn to spot a bad investment." She signaled to Naomi, "Play the video, please." Naomi nodded and clicked a file on her laptop. The projector screen flickered to life. It was footage from a hidden security camera. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. The setting was the living room of Evelyn's penthouse. On the screen, Sabine was pacing back and forth, holding a glass of wine. David was sitting on the sofa, looking miserable. Evelyn was not in the room in the video. She had evidently stepped out, leaving them alone. The audio was crisp. "She is not going to sign it. David," Sabine's voice hissed from the speakers. "The old hag is stubborn. She knows we need the liquidity." "Keep your voice down," David whispered on the recording. "Mom is just in the kitchen." "Who cares?" Sabine snapped. "She is half-deaf anyway. Listen to me. If she doesn't sign the conservatorship voluntarily, we take the nuclear option. We get Arenzi to declare her incompetent. We put her in that facility in Riverdale. Once she is locked up, we have power of attorney. We can liquidate the tech stocks and buy the beach house, and we can finally stop pretending to care about her." "What about Daisy?" David asked. "If Mom finds out Daisy is an investigator—" Sabine laughed on the screen. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Daisy, please, that girl is a mess. I broke her years ago. She is too busy chasing petty criminals to look at her own family. And if she does sniff around, we will paint her as crazy. I have been planting seeds about her mental instability for years. No one will believe her over us." The video cut to black. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I looked at Sabine. Her face had drained of all color. She looked like a wax figure melting under heat. Graham Cole had his head in his hands. He knew his career was likely over. He had suborned perjury based on a conspiracy. Evelyn leaned into the microphone. "You thought you broke her," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "But you forgot one thing. Sabine, you cannot break blood. You tried to make my granddaughter feel small so she wouldn't realize she was a giant. You tried to keep us apart because you knew that if we ever stood together, you would be finished." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, they claim that Daisy Garcia is manipulating me for my money. They claim she is a gold digger who swooped in at the last minute." Evelyn pulled a document from her purse. "This is the trust agreement Daisy and I finalized yesterday. I want the court to see the terms." She handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Clause 4, Evelyn cited. Upon my death, 90% of my assets, approximately $3.8 billion, will be transferred immediately to the Lane Charitable Foundation. The primary mission of this foundation is to provide legal and financial aid to victims of elder abuse and coercive control." She looked at me, her eyes softening. "Daisy Garcia receives no billions. She receives a salary as the executive director of the foundation. She controls the money, yes, But she cannot spend it on herself. She cannot buy yachts or mansions. She can only use it to help people. I offered her the money. Your Honor, I offered to make her a billionaire. And do you know what she said? Evelyn's voice wavered with pride. She said, Grandma, I don't want the money. I just want the power to stop people like Sabine. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. Daisy is not the predator, Evelyn declared. She is the protector, and David and Sabine Lane are nothing but common thieves who got caught. Judge Mercer closed the file. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, his expression was made of stone. In 30 years on the bench, Mercer said, his voice deep and angry, I have rarely seen a case of such calculated, systemic cruelty to isolate a child, to exploit a mother, and to weaponize the legal system to cover your tracks. It is reprehensible. He looked at the plaintiffs. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied with prejudice. The motion to freeze assets is denied. He turned to the court stenographer. I am also forwarding the transcript of these proceedings, along with the video evidence and financial records presented by Ms. Garcia, to the district attorney's office. I am recommending an immediate criminal investigation into David and Sabine Lane for fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and filing false documents with the court. The gavel came down. Bang. It sounded like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into chaos. The reporters were shouting questions. The bailiff was moving toward David and Sabine, not to arrest them yet, but to ensure they didn't leave before the papers were served. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my heart was light. I gathered my files. I closed my notebook, the notebook that had started it all. I walked toward the gate. I had to pass them to leave. David reached out. He grabbed my arm. His grip was desperate, his fingers digging into my blazer. Daisy, he pleaded. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed. Daisy, please, you have to stop this. They are talking about prison. I am your father. We can fix this. I was scared of her. Daisy, you know how she is. I was just trying to survive. Please, tell the judge. Tell him it was a mistake. I looked down at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had signed the permission slips for me to be evaluated by a school psychologist instead of listening to me, the same hand that had taken $15,000 a month while I wore thrift store shoes. I gently but firmly peeled his fingers off my sleeve. I was scared too. David, I said. I was 9 years old. I was scared of the dark. I was scared of being unloved. I was scared of the woman you brought into our house. I waited every single day for you to be my father. I waited for you to stand up. I waited for you to protect me. I stepped back, creating a distance between us that could never be bridged. You had a lifetime of chances, I said, my voice steady and final. You had 25 years to be a dad. You chose to be an accomplice instead. I don't have a father. I have a case number. I turned away from him. I didn't look at Sabine. She was sitting in her chair, staring blankly at the wall, the ruin of her life finally sinking in. She didn't deserve my anger anymore. She was irrelevant. I walked through the gate and found Evelyn waiting for me. The crowd parted for her. She stood there, leaning on her cane, a small smile on her face. Ready to go? She asked. Ready, I said. We walked out of the courtroom together. The press was waiting in the hallway, a pack of wolves sensing fresh meat. Daisy, Daisy, how does it feel to send your father to jail? Mrs. Lane, are you planning to sue? Is it true you are starting a foundation? Flashes went off like lightning. Microphones were thrust in our faces. Evelyn stopped. She looked at the reporters. She didn't speak to them. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was strong, warm, and real. She pulled me slightly closer, a public display of unity that screamed louder than any headline. Let them talk, Evelyn whispered to me. Let them write their stories. We know the truth. She squeezed my hand. You fought for yourself, Daisy, and then you fought for me. From now on, No matter what happens, no matter who comes for us, I am in your corner. We are the Lanes, and we don't break. I looked at my grandmother. I looked at the woman who had saved everything for me. The woman who had loved me from afar when I thought I was unlovable. "Let's go home, Grandma," I said. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight of a new day. The rain had stopped, the air smelled clean, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from a home I hated. I was walking toward a future I owned. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below and let me know your location so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and redemption, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the work, and smash the hype button so this video can reach even more people who need to hear it. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.